Good morning and welcome everyone to the Falk Auditorium at the Brookings Institution. I'm Suzanne Maloney. I'm Vice President and Director of Foreign Policy here at Brookings, and I am tremendously pleased to welcome you all to our Alan and Jane Batkin International Leaders Forum, a Brookings series that features world leaders and senior officials for major policy discussions. Today, we're truly honored to be joined by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Bui Thanh Son. Foreign Minister Son plays an important role. Foreign Minister Son plays a very important role in Vietnam's expanding relationship with the United States. In September 2023, the two countries elevated their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. As part of this new status, both capitals established an annual dialogue between Vietnam's Minister of Foreign Affairs and the U.S. Secretary of State to promote bilateral relations between the two countries and to discuss potential opportunities and challenges. Today's discussion here at Brookings will explore some of those opportunities and challenges and will feature a robust examination of Vietnam's economic and security positioning within Southeast Asia and the broader Indo-Pacific region. Allow me to provide a very brief introduction for Foreign Minister Son. The Foreign Minister began his very distinguished career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1987, and he's held several prestigious positions within the ministry, including as Chief Negotiator for the Comprehensive Partnership and Cooperation Agreement between Vietnam and the European Union. His most recent position prior to his current post was as First Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, the second in charge of the ministry. My colleague, Jonathan Stromseth, who is a non-resident senior fellow with the Brookings Foreign Policy Program, as well as a professor of practice with the Sanford School of Public Affairs at Duke University, will moderate today's discussion. Thank you both for joining us here today. Foreign Minister Son will begin with some brief opening remarks before joining Jonathan in a moderated discussion. And finally, the event will conclude with a question and answer session for all those of you in the audience, both in person and virtually. All of us at Brookings are grateful to Alan and Jane Batkin for their support of our International Leaders Forum, which has enabled us to hear from Foreign Minister Son today. Brookings supporters are very important in that they make our work possible, but they also respect the institution's commitment to independence, which is sacrosanct. As with all of our activities, the views expressed on the stage today are solely those of the speakers. As a reminder, we're on the record, and this event is being live streamed. Online viewers may submit questions via email at events@brookings.edu or via social media using the hashtag #USVietnam. Foreign Minister, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Maloney, Vice President of the Brookings Institution. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Maloney for her kind introduction. I also thank the Brookings Institution and all of you for giving me and my delegation a warm welcome. It is such a pleasure to be here at the Brookings, a prestige think tank with a major role in policy-making process in the United States, including foreign policy. I know Brookings has over the years had productive working relationship with research organizations in Vietnam, including the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. A vivid example of that connection is my old friend, Dr. Jonathan Stromseth, who had worked in Vietnam before and has since promoted policies and scholar exchanges between the two countries. Jonathan, it is great to see you again, and please do not grieve me over the hard questions after this. Ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam's perspective, I would like to present brief remarks on three major topics. First, on Vietnam's perspective on the world and region, and second, Vietnam's foreign policy and bamboo diplomacy, and our vision for Vietnam-U.S. Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. First, on Vietnam's perspective on the world and our region. The world is undergoing dramatic and profound changes, some unpredictable and unprecedented. Peace, cooperation, and development remain the prevailing trend and common aspirations of all nations. Yet, in certain parts of the world, especially in Europe and the Middle East, and some in Asia, peace is being challenged, most seriously since the end of the Cold War. The international community has to deal with multiple crises, including traditional and non-traditional security challenges and the confluence of them. Economically, the world is also facing strong headwinds, with the World Bank warning of its weakest half-decade performance in global growth. On a brighter note, the Asia-Indo-Pacific continues to be a dynamic area and the engine of the global economic growth. Last year, when Indonesia hosted its ASEAN chairmanship, the theme of the conference was ASEAN, epicentrum of economic growth. We also see the four of the world's biggest economies, namely the United States, China, Japan, and India, are located in this vibrant region. Since the end of the Cold War, our region has enjoyed longer peace than most other parts of the world. At present, at the heart of it is ASEAN, with a population of 670 million people, a combined GDP of $3,500 billion, are playing a central role in evolving regional architecture. However, our region's peace, stability, and prosperity cannot be taken for granted. This region has become a theater for strategic competition. Many potential flashpoints, such as the South China Sea, or we call East Sea, and emerging non-traditional security challenges, such as climate change, sea level rise, water security, aging population, digital divide, cyber crimes, etc., can easily unravel at the hard-earned socio-economic development of our region. Therefore, we hope that all countries, especially major powers, will act responsibly towards each other and for a better future of the region and the world at large. We believe that competition among major powers is natural, but conflict is not inevitable. In this connection, Vietnam welcomes the ongoing efforts to stabilize the relations between the United States and China. We also encourage all the major powers to respect the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter, international law, and ASEAN centrality, and the legitimate rights and interests of all countries in the region. Like many other countries in the region, Vietnam welcomes the United States' positive and constructive contributions to our shared peace and prosperity. We hope that the United States will further strengthen the economic pillar of the Indo-Pacific strategy, deepen the ASEAN-US Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, respect ASEAN's centrality, and support ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific, we call AOIP. It takes two to tango, such that the United States matters for ASEAN, and ASEAN matters for the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, I would go to the second part of it, is Vietnam's foreign policy and bamboo diplomacy. Despite many rapid challenges in the world, for us, one thing remains unchanged. That is Vietnam's foreign policy of independence, self-reliance, peace, friendship and cooperation, and multilateralization and diversification of external relations, and proactive international integration. Vietnam is a reliable friend and partner, and an active and responsible member of the international community. Our foreign policy aims at not only to serve our own national interests, but also making greater contribution to peace, cooperation, and sustainable development in the region and the world. This represents the philosophy of Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy, namely strong roots, sturdy stems, and flexible branches. Strong roots signify the tradition of independence, self-reliance for the interests of our nation-state, and for equality and mutual benefits between and among nations. Sturdy stems indicate the upholding of justice, humanity, faithfulness, and international law, even at difficult times as we face today. Flexible branches means creativity in the conduct of foreign policy on the basis of understanding of ourselves and of our partners. In other words, it means perseverance in principles and flexibility in implementation. Nowhere does this resonate stronger than in our relations with major powers. In 2023, Vietnam hosted both U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping for state visits, which means Vietnam wishes and can have good relations with all major powers. Thanks to Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy, we now have established strategic partnership with all of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. To date, we have 30 strategic and comprehensive partnerships, and others are member of 16 FTAs, linking Vietnam with 60 economies in the world. All of that is to realize our strategic development goals at home, to make Vietnam a developing country with a modern industry and an upper middle income level by 2030, and a developed country with a high income status by 2045. To that end, in addition to our endeavor and our self-reliance, our self-efforts, Vietnam needs a peaceful, stable, and favorable external environment, and very importantly, the valuable cooperation and support from the international community and major partners, including the United States of America. Now I turn to the third part. Our vision for the Vietnam-US Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. As our General Secretary Nguyễn Phú Trọng and many other Vietnamese leaders have stated, Vietnam considers the United States one of our leading partners. In retrospect, even the most optimistic people couldn't have imagined how far our two countries have gone from being former foes to friends and now comprehensive strategic partnership. I would like to quote President Joe Biden's remarks at the 78th UN General Assembly. Quote, "It would have been unthinkable for an American president to stand in Hanoi alongside a Vietnamese leader and announced a mutual commitment to the highest level of countries' partnership." End quote. Since normalization of relations in 1995, every sitting U.S. president has visited Vietnam. General Secretary Nguyễn Phú Trọng visits to the United States in 2015, and President Joe Biden's state visit to Vietnam in 2023 are outstanding and historic events in our relationship. Our trade has increased 245 times from a mere $450 million in 1995 when we normalized relations to now $110 billion in 2023. Currently, there are about 30,000 Vietnamese students studying and about 2.4 million overseas Vietnamese living in the United States, which serve as an important bridge for people-to-people ties. Although we still have differences, we have goodwill, frank and candid dialogue, like I have yesterday with the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, with the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, and later on with Administrator of USAID in the afternoon yesterday. Thus, to minimize them on the basis of mutual respect for independence, sovereignty, and political systems, as mentioned in many Vietnam-US joint statements. After so many ups and downs, the relationship between our two countries is now a model in international relations, especially for countries currently at war and in conflict. Last year, President Joe Biden's historic visit to Vietnam, two countries made another major milestone by upgrading our relations to comprehensive strategic partnership for peace, cooperation, and sustainable development. It took nearly 80 years, 80, since President Ho Chi Minh's first letter to U.S. President Truman, and also almost 30 years since the normalization of our relations, to bring Vietnam-US to where we are today. This reaffirms the fact that we cannot change the past, but we can change and make the future. Looking forward, we have strong determination to work closely with the United States to deepen our CSP in the following directions. First, strengthen political trust. Both countries should continue to promote high-level exchanges, respect each other's political systems, and maintain regular dialogues. Our American friends and partners often say, a strong, independent, resilient, and prosperous Vietnam is in the interest of the United States. We look forward to stronger actions by the U.S. to realize this commitment. Second, boost our economic trade and investment cooperation, which is the driving force for our CSP. We should focus on supply chain resilience, infrastructure connectivity, digital economy, energy, green economy, and logistics. We hope that the United States will soon recognize Vietnam's market economy status, and we expect that the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, IPEF, will be open, inclusive, ensuring the needs and interests of all participants, especially in bridging the development gap and promoting the digital transformation and sustainable development in the region. Third, promote cooperation in science and technology and innovation. In particular, we attach great importance to the semiconductor ecosystems, critical minerals, and artificial intelligence. In tandem with trade and economic ties, our cooperation in this area can elevate Vietnam's position in the regional and global value chain, which also benefits the United States and other partners. Fourth, strengthen our people-to-people ties. This is the sustainable foundation for our CSP. We thus support robust cultural exchanges, educational and training cooperation, and hope that the United States will extend greater assistance to high-quality human resource development for Vietnam. And fifth, coordinate more closely with the framework of multilateral forum, which, such as ASEAN, United Nations, APEC, Mekong-US Partnership, etc. With a strong belief in the power of multilateralism, Vietnam is ready to work with the United States and other partners to address transnational and global issues like climate change, food security, health security, anti-terrorism, and non-proliferation. Ladies and gentlemen, if history is any indicator, whenever Vietnam has good relations with the U.S., it is not only benefits each of our respective countries, but also serves the shared interests of peace and prosperity in our region and beyond. I strongly believe that the elevation of the Vietnam-U.S. relations to CSP has opened up remarkable opportunities for our two countries. It's also high time that we would redouble our efforts to speed up the implementation of the CSP in all areas, thereby serving the interests of our people and making positive contributions to peace, stability, and prosperity in the Asia-Indo-Pacific region and the world. Thank you for your attention, and now I'm open to your comments and questions. Thank you. I will stay here.
Go ahead. Well, thank you very much, Minister Sun, and it's great to see you again after a few years.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to see you again here, also in DC, and that in this prestige Brookings institution.
So we have an opportunity here first to delve into your really sweeping and thoughtful remarks, and also have an opportunity to, after we have a conversation, thank you, engage with the audience, both our virtual audience and the audience here in the room. We had the opportunity to get to know each other something like 30 years ago when we were much younger.
Yes.
And I think I was setting up an office of the Asia Foundation, and you were in Hanoi,
yes.
and you were then Deputy Director of IIR, or the
yes.
Institute of International Relations, now the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. We developed some conferences on the domestic sources of foreign policy and how that would affect the relationship.
Yes.
Also, how international factors would affect the relationship. A lot has happened since normalization in '95.
Yes.
And I think one signpost is the comprehensive partnership in 2013. I think after that was created, there were quiet discussions about upgrading to a comprehensive strategic partnership, but it took some time. And I wanted to ask, I think the conventional wisdom in Washington was that maybe the Vietnamese weren't quite ready. Why did the Vietnamese choose you as foreign minister and others to elevate the relationship with the United States late last year?
First, I have to thank Jonathan Stromseth, an old friend me, myself, and a friend of Vietnam. I think Jonathan has been in Vietnam even before the normalizations of our relations in 1945. We were one among friends in Americas and friends in Vietnam to work together for the promotion and normalization of our relations. And yesterday I also met with some other friends who also have made a lot of efforts and contributions to our normalizations back more than roughly 30 years back. So thank you again for your early coming to Vietnam and also your contributions to our bilateral relations. Second is that I want to share with you that Vietnam and Americas, we have gone through a long journey. As you see, we have at war for quite a long time. And after the war, when Vietnam helped the Cambodian people to cope with the genocide regime like Pol Pot, Isari. But again, at that time, the international community and American friends here even still did not understand why the reason. But last year, Cambodian Prime Minister said, now with the court and trial of Pol Pot Isari, then Vietnam's was really, make a really humanitarian gesture of helping the Cambodia to overcome the genocide regime back 40 years back. So I think from that war and then misunderstanding of each other for quite some time, we entered normalizations, and 30 years after that, in 1995, and then in 2013, we established a comprehensive partnership, as Jonathan has mentioned. I think up to now, next year, we would celebrate 30 years of our normalization process. And we see, looking back, as I said in my remarks at the beginning, we started from humanitarian gestures and cooperations, like helping the Americans to bring back MIA to America. And now this process is still going on. But the first, cooperation between the two countries was on MIA. Mm-hmm. But after that, then we expanded our cooperations to all other areas, especially in trade. In 2000, we signed the BTA. That was a landmark.
The bilateral trade agreement.
In bilateral BTA, bilateral trade agreements. Mm. And then the trade between the two countries increased very fast. In that sense, America also removed Vietnam from the list of enemy trading act. And then you also put us in the PTF in order to promote our bilateral relations. Cooperation in other areas like people-to-people exchange, educational exchange, in investments have also boomed. And more importantly, the mutual understanding, mutual trust has increased. And I think in 2013, the two leaders, President Joe Biden and our General Secretary, hosted the state visit of President Joe Biden to Hanoi, and we elevated our relationship to comprehensive strategic partnership. There are two meanings in it. One is that we have come to a matured stage of turning from former foes to friends in 2013 when we established the comprehensive partnership. and now to mutual trust, to CSP. So mutual trust, understanding between our two nations are high. Second is that cooperation are now expanding to all areas, cover all areas. When we still identify trade, investment, science and technology, innovation, etc., would be the main driver of our cooperation. And we also expand our cooperation to other new areas like energy transition, and especially the building up of ecosystems of semiconductors in Vietnam. This is a remarkable process.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd love to come back to this and look at how we can build out the scaffolding of the CSP, or Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, going forward. But I wanted to ask maybe a broader contextual question about geopolitics in Southeast Asia. It seems to me that there's kind of two schools of thought today that aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. One is that increasing U.S.-China competition is sort of creating an impossible choice for countries in the region who may be forced to choose between Beijing and Washington. Yet I think there's also a sense that Vietnam is doing quite well in this context. It has many suitors. It's hosted President Xi, President Biden, and perhaps is hedging in political science terms, to secure benefits from rival camps. The other school of thought, I think, is that there's a growing multipolarity in Southeast Asia, and the region is moving beyond the need for a binary choice. And this also seems consistent with Vietnamese foreign policy. After all, I think, if I'm right, you've also just upgraded relations with Japan and Australia. This is perhaps a question more for an analyst than a foreign minister, but you played both roles in your career. And I was wondering if you can give your thoughts on this geopolitical context and how Vietnam sees it in the formulation of their foreign policy.
Thank you. I as a request to you at the beginning that do not grill me over the hard questions, but again, this is a real politics. We, as I say, we see the global situation now characterized by the most outstanding issue is competition among major powers. This is a real sense. We also see that the main trend of the international situation is that peace, stability, still the aspirations of all nations. And the competition among major powers is natural. But we can manage that. And other countries can contribute to the hard-won peace and stability that our mankind has achieved so far. Vietnam, we have gone through many years of wars. We understand and we treasured how peace and stability is valuable for not only for Vietnamese people, but for the whole region and the world. So in that sense, we, as I said to you, conduct a foreign policy of peace, stability, cooperation, and independence, together with multilateralization and diversification of our foreign relations. We would show our sincerity and our earnest aspirations for peace and stability. So in that sense, we have good and we are reliable and trusted friends of all nations. And in that sense, as I said to you last year, we elevated our relationship not only with the United States, but with China. We also elevated our relationship to our shared future strategic significance. And we also elevated our relationship with Japan and most recently with Australia. And we are continue to elevate our relationship with other countries in the region and the world. What we do is that from our hard-won peace and stability, we want to contribute and we want to be a responsible member of the international community. We want to have and contribute to have a stabilized relationship among major powers. Competition continues to go, but it can be managed. And they can cooperate with each other, not only to address the global issues like climate change, like cyber security, pandemic diseases, etc. That can be the common goals of us, and we can work together to promote peace and stability and prosperity of all countries.
Well, it does seem like what you described sounds very much like a manifestation of bamboo diplomacy.
Yeah.
And I have a question about that. I'm teaching a course at Duke University currently, and we're looking at how developing countries are navigating U.S.-China rivalry, particularly in the foreign aid and development space. And the students are giving presentations and even writing papers on Vietnam. And we had a discussion about bamboo diplomacy. And one of the students said, you know, bamboo still breaks if the tension is really high. And I wanted to ask, with an eye to that, what destabilizing factors, potential sources of conflict do you really worry about that could lead to that sort of outcome? Obviously, there's a lot of tension in the South China Sea as we speak between China and the Philippines that are sparking some concern of, you know, conflict between the U.S. and China more directly. So I'm just wondering, what are your biggest worries in the region?
Yes, bamboo diplomacy, as I described in my remarks earlier. Why we call bamboo Vietnam's bamboo policy? Because bamboo has been associated with the Vietnamese long ago. For the Vietnamese, we use bamboo not only to defend our country, but also use bamboo to develop our country. And in that sense, the philosophy of bamboo policy has 3 dimensions. With roots, it must be strong. Roots here, it means the principles that we must keep and attach to. Then stem must be steady. Steady stems here, it relates to our philosophy and traditional foreign thoughts on foreign policy. That is faithfulness, that is sincerity, that is to uphold the principles of international law, especially UN Charter. In that, this is the basis that we would conduct our foreign policy in a very flexible manner, that is, we call branches. Flexible branches. It means when we look at particular partners, we would understand how the strength, the difficulties of each other, of each of our respective partner, and then we would have defined our own policies towards that partner. So in that sense, I think as I see, I agree with you that we are facing with multiple challenges. But among this one would be the most difficult one is how to maneuver among the major powers competition. And the conflicts can take place anytime, anywhere, if we don't have flexible, skillful foreign policies to manage it. Vietnam, we would work our best or make the most efforts to be the responsible member of the international community. We would, have reliable friends, trusted friends in order to promote our bilateral relations and also to contribute to the hard-won peace and also stability of the world and the region so that all of us can prosper.
Well, let's turn back to the comprehensive strategic partnership and how we can build out the scaffolding. You mentioned the importance of science and technology and semiconductors. That strikes me as a very fruitful area where the United States wants to diversify its supply chains, and Vietnam wants to develop its own domestic industry in that area. Another area that I know was highlighted in the joint statement for the fact sheet for the CSP was cooperation on climate change. And I know that the United States is involved in the Just Energy Transition Partnership efforts, a $15.5 billion effort, if I'm right, to support the energy transition in Vietnam. And there's also bilateral initiatives with USAID, and I know you mentioned that you met with the administrator, Samantha Power. Could you tell us a little bit more about the climate challenges in Vietnam and how the United States and Vietnam could cooperate in that area?
Yes, I think CSP has defined two elements I would like to sum up. One is that we would consider trade, investment, and innovation, science, technology, education as the driving force of our relationship for a long time to come. And the second, we identify semiconductors industry as the breakthrough in our relationship in the future. Actually, Vietnam joins the ecosystem of semiconductors later than many of our partners in the world. So that's why the coming of two of us, Vietnam and US, in building ecosystems of semiconductors and chip would help Vietnam in the process to increase its ladder of value chains in the world, and also helps us in the process of modernization of the country. As I said, that our aim by 2030 would be the modernized countries with upper middle income by 2030. This can do only by finding some breakthrough in our process of modernization of the country, and semiconductor would be the ascent. But at the same time, we also take care of the issue of climate change, as I said. Climate change in Vietnam is very much affected, and according to World Bank, as you said, one of the 5 countries most affected by climate change. Currently, and yesterday I talked with Administrator Samantha Power of USAID. She also had a visit to the Mekong Delta, and we was very much agreed in a common observation that Mekong Delta is now most affected by climate change because rising level has made the salt intrusion into most provinces of Mekong Delta, which now hosted 20 million people population and the main place for growing rice and also providing food security not only for Vietnam but for the world as well. Why I say that? Because last year, even in the difficult time, we exported 8 million tons of rice to the world in order to contribute to the process of food security. But all that is now changing because of the climate change and the transnational water management. So we are now working with the United States in order to have the plans, concrete plans to help Vietnam to adapt to this new situation. For example, we are now talking about projects to help Vietnam in agricultural adaptation, not only to cope with the climate change by finding new types of seeds of rice. Before we use natural water from Mekong River, but now with the intrusion of sea levels, we have to use different types of seeds to grow rice in the Mekong Delta. But at the same time, Mekong Delta would be the region that can supply the whole, rice for our population in Vietnam and also the world, as I mentioned about. So I think this project would be very important for us in the future.
Yeah. Another aspect, as I understand it, of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership is coordination on regional and global issues like climate change. And I wanted to ask, I think many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, you and I participated in a trilateral conference involving the US, Vietnam, and China, maybe a couple conferences. Fast forward today, and US-China competition and rivalry is at a whole new level. As the US and Vietnam thinks about cooperation on global issues like climate change or public health and what have you, do you think such a dialogue, such a discussion, a trilateral discussion between China and the US and Vietnam is possible? The US and China are at least talking again about climate change. They've resumed an official dialogue. Is there some possibility of trilateral work in this area involving Vietnam?
I have to say that I appreciate it very much, creative thinking of Jonathan. I think 30 years back, when we first think of the trilateral cooperation between US, Vietnam, and China, the context at that time was different. At that time, we only normalized the relations with US. And 4 years earlier, we also normalized the relations with China. When Jonathan raised that idea, I was at the Institute of International Relations. I thought that it was difficult. But that's more for the part of Vietnam. But now the context is different. The two of you are in very much competition. It's now for the part of Vietnam we can contribute. So I think this idea is creative, but also can be feasible in the two sense. One is that we choose a very common basis, common interest, issue of common interest for us to cooperate. That is climate change. All countries, this is a global issue. All countries have to cooperate to address this issue. So 3 of us can cooperate is normal. Second is that though between you there are some difficulties, but I think that you also reach a common understanding that US-China would work together to address the issue. And Vietnam is in particular position that now we can contribute to stabilize the relation between US and China in the future. If that idea can be realized, I think it's good.
Before we open up to questions, I do want to address one issue because it's very much been in the newspapers the last 3 or 4 days. Vietnamese domestic politics has been covered because of the resignation of one of your top leaders, the president. Investors, foreign investors, are always looking for stability. What should they be thinking right now?
Oh, it's also a hard question. But again, I can say that, as you see in Vietnam, the campaign for anti-corruption has been going on, and it is welcomed by the international community, including the businesses. We are now working very hard to create the most favorable conditions for international businesses to come and work in Vietnam profitably. The resignation of the president, I think in Vietnam, has not affected our foreign policy as well as our own policies of economic development. Why I say so? Because in Vietnam, if you look at the situation in Vietnam, we have a collective leadership. We have a collective foreign policy. We have a collective decided economic path of development. So every 5 years, we would have a party congress. The last one was in 2021. We set out the strategy for economic development until 2030, and with a vision until 2045. All the areas would include the economic growth and economic environments for domestic as well as international businesses to invest and do business in Vietnam. And I think one or two, figures in the leadership has resigned does not change the situation. And we would continue to have collective leadership, collective decision, and also move our relationship, bilateral relationship forwards, and also create the most favorable conditions for international businesses to come. Only last week, before I depart here for the visit, our Prime Minister received a big delegation from USABC, ASEAN-US Business Council, visited Vietnam. This is the biggest US delegations of businesses. Big businesses came to Vietnam. The same questions and most questions, including issues of bureaucracy, including issues of difficulties in getting the licenses, difficulties in implementing ODA projects, etc. And all were addressed by the ministers attended at the meeting, and also by our Prime Minister. The commitment is there. If we want to move forward, we would have to create a good and favorable environment, not only for domestic business, but international investors to come and do business in Vietnam.
We only have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I have to get to the audience. First, I want to take one question from the virtual audience. And you had spoken in your
virtual,
It's come to us online. I think we have a very large virtual audience with us. And you had talked about people-to-people relations. There's a question from Linda Yar. I'm going to put two together here, of George Washington University. And she said, what should the role be of joint academic research and scholarly exchange in solidifying relations between our two countries? A related question from Andrew Pham of the University of Las Vegas. Does the speaker see international Vietnamese students who are currently studying in the U.S. playing a role in facilitating the elevated relationship? You can take either one of those.
As I said, the process of normalization and promotion of bilateral relations has mobilized the support and contributions from different circles, different status, both Americas and Vietnam. Academia is one of the very driving force in our normalization and also promotion of our bilateral relations. Like you came to us more than 30 years back, and creative ideas. At that time, I remember a group of professors at Columbia and other universities in the US worked together define on how we can normalize relations and how we can move our relationship forward. And now I think it's more than that. We still need and treasured the contributions from academia, both countries, on creating and define how we can move and deepen and implement our CSP more effectively to bring benefits to both peoples. And now the younger generations is students. I said to you, 30,000 Vietnamese are studying in the US. They would be the bridge of our relationship in the future. And currently, they are also a good human resource to help us in the process of development. I have to say, for example, we have a network of all the students working in science and technology in America. We have globally network, but in Americas, there are big students engaged in science and technology, and they have a network with inside Vietnam, students inside Vietnam, and they consult with each other regularly. And I think the network would help to promote our cooperation, not only in science and technology, but also our mutual understanding. Help, even I don't know how we can define after CSP, another framework, it would be higher in the next 50 years.
Over there, John? Yeah.
Yes.
Foreign Minister Sohn, my name is John. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Foreign Minister Sohn, my name is John Brandon. I'm with the Asia Foundation here in Washington.
Yes.
We met before.
You look familiar with me.
Yes, just more gray hair. But thank you for your remarks. You talked about the economic relationship between the United States and Vietnam, and it's indeed been remarkable from a few $300 or $400 million, when at the time of the bilateral trade agreement, and now, over more than $110 billion, I believe. And you talked about issues that were important to IPEF and Vietnam, resilient supply chains, energy transition, digital economy. In less than 10 months, the United States is going to be have a policy where, through IPEF, looking at greater economic cooperation in the region, where the United States, Vietnam, and other countries will play an important role. Or it could be a return to more protectionist sentiment, depending on our election in November. I was wondering how you would think that Vietnam would handle these challenging waters if it were to become the latter as opposed to the former. And again, it's nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Very good questions, but relates more economic issue. But I have to say that it's also more political, in this sense that we, for our parts, and many countries see multilateralism and also free trade within the framework of WTO is still the main driving force of our cooperation. And in that sense, we welcome the initiative of the Americas, of IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Cooperation Framework. Why? Because it would create a stable supply chain, as stable manufacturing chains, and also create good conditions, environments for cooperation. There are two elements that Vietnam contributed to this process, is that IPEF should be open to all countries. Second, IPEF should be inclusive. That is, to include more countries in the process. So that's why we participated actively in the discussions on IPEF. And I think if this one is achieved, then would create good conditions for not only Vietnam and US, but all members of IPEFs to work in a good environment for our cooperation. Whether it is changed or not, it depends very much. But again, international regimes, when it came and when it comes into being, is really contributions and efforts of all countries, not one single country. And I think there should be a good foundations for us to continue to promote in the future, whether it is changed by any political factors.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry I went on too long, so we're going to have to close down. But it's been, let me join Suzanne in saying it's been such an honor to be able to host you. I've known you as an intellectual analyst and now a minister. I think of you as a minister intellectual, I think. It's been great to re-engage. Please join me in thanking Minister Sun for joining us.
Thank you. I have to say that thank you, Jonathan, thank you, Vice President Susan, for this opportunity. And I know that you still have some or many questions wants to ask and exchange. But again, I also address in my initial and opening remarks. And if anything, we can exchange further. This is the Brookings institution would be the bridge for us. You can connect or contact with us in the future to address other or exchange on other issues. As I say, academic exchange would help us a lot. Helps not only the politicians, but helps the businesses to find a good way to promote our bilateral cooperation.
And I think those are great remarks to end on. Let me ask everybody here in the audience to please stay seated while Foreign Minister Sun and his delegation exits the building. It will just take a moment or two, and we'll let you know when everybody can exit.
Thank you again.